Hello and thanks for joining me. This video is a response to some of the reactions I received to my recent review of the new Harley-Davidson Pan America adventure motorcycle. In that video I suggested that the Pan America and the new Revolution Max engine represent a new direction for Harley-Davidson, and it seems that in making these comments I have been engaging in some inadvertent Buell baiting. That's to say, my comments elicited a very strong reaction from some Buell owners. Actually, I never even mentioned Buell in this video, and I think that fact also enraged some Buell owners. Now, I am well aware from previous experience that many Buell owners have a healthy hatred for Harley-Davidson because of some of the history of what happened and ultimately the demise of the Buell company. However, I was surprised at the level of hate and anger coming from some Buell fans, directed not at me, I hasten to say, but rather at the Harley-Davidson Motor Company. But the main comments that I received were regarding the Buell Ulysses and how that was an adventure bike produced by Harley-Davidson, through Buell of course, many years ago. And therefore this is not really a new direction for the company. The Pan America is not a new direction for the company, but it's rather simply revisiting something that happened 15 years ago, which if allowed to run may well have led Harley-Davidson in a very different direction and may well have left it in a very different position both financially and in terms of its market placement to where it is now. So I have to admit that amongst the rage and hatred for Harley-Davidson and some of the comments that I've received, there are some very good points made. So out of respect for Eric Buell and all the fans of his motorcycles, I'm going to talk briefly about the history of Buell motorcycles and speculate about what might have been if Harley-Davidson had not shut the business down. So for those of you who are not aware, the Buell Motorcycle Company was an American motorcycle manufacturer started in 1983 by Eric Buell, who was an ex-Harley-Davidson motorcycle engineer. Eric Buell is widely acknowledged as a pioneer of motorcycle technology. He has introduced many great innovations and developments to the motorcycle world, and of course to Harley-Davidson's in particular. So for example, Buell pioneered the rim-mounted brake rotor, which he claimed stiffened the rim and therefore allowed for lighter spokes with reduced wheel weight. Also made many fantastic developments to the Harley-Davidson Sportster engine, massively increasing its performance. And Eric Buell has received many honours and recognition for his work over the years, including being enrolled into the AMA Hall of Fame, and he was named as Motorcyclist of the Year by Motorcycle magazine. As well as being an engineer, Buell was a racer, and that's really what lay behind his work and his motivation. He left Harley-Davidson in the early 1980s to set up a company through which he wanted to build a bike that would be capable of beating the Yamaha TZ bikes that were dominating the AMA Formula One racing at the time. The company he set up was initially called Pittsburgh Performance Products, but he later changed its name to the Buell Motorcycle Company. Now, in brief, what happened was that in the early 1990s, Harley-Davidson bought into the company, and by 1999, they bought more shares in the company so that they effectively totally owned Buell. And Eric Buell was only left with a very small holding in the company that he started. Now, I'm guessing that initially this relationship worked well because the Buell company continued to develop and expand, and it produced an ever better range of bikes under Harley-Davidson control. So I assume that Harley-Davidson were providing the financial backing for this business growth, and also very importantly, they provided the dealer network through which the Buell motorcycles could be sold, something which Buell had previously lacked. However, during the economic downturn of 2008-2009, Harley-Davidson really started to hit the rocks. They hired a new CEO, Keith Wandel, who had to steer the company through what was at the time being called the worst market conditions in the company's history. There were also several other new appointments made to the management team around the same time, and this new management team at Harley-Davidson decided to shut down the Buell motorcycle company in order to focus their energies on what they saw as being the core products and the core market of Harley-Davidson. With the benefit of hindsight, many regard this decision to close Buell just as it was really exploding in growth. They regard it as being one of the biggest blunders in corporate American history. And that's really the point of this video. Buell was doing well. It was producing some fantastic bikes, which I'll discuss in a moment. Sales of Buell bikes were really growing exponentially, and so the company was quite literally cut off in its prime. If Buell had been allowed to continue developing the innovative bikes it was selling when it was shut down, and Harley-Davidson had continued to back that development, then Harley-Davidson would unquestionably be in a very different position to where it is now. I spoke in my video review of the Pan America about how Harley-Davidson has, in my opinion, painted itself into a corner as a one-dimensional manufacturer, producing just one type of bike, which is the big air-cooled cruisers and tourers. And I compared that to the success that Triumph is having currently, selling bikes across a wide range of different styles. You know, Triumph produces retro bikes, sports bikes, adventure bikes, cruisers, nakeds, tourers, muscle bikes, and it produces all of those successfully. And that's really where Harley-Davidson needs to be, and where it's trying to get to be with this development of this new engine and the new bike. I can't talk in detail about all the bikes that Buell produced over the life of the business, because it would make this video way too long, and also I don't have sufficient knowledge about Buell motorcycles to do them justice. So I'm just going to mention some of the models that were important in the development of the company, and then I'm going to focus on the Buell Ulysses, which was the model which prompted this video in the first place. Buell started, as I mentioned a minute ago, producing racing bikes. So I know that the first bike that they produced was the RW750 Road Warrior, which was a racing bike designed to compete, which it did, compete very successfully in the AMA Formula One races. But then Buell went on to start making road bikes as well. So they developed the RR1000 Battle Twin, which was a street sports bike. The bikes that I'm more familiar with are things like the S2 Thunderbolt and the S1 Lightning, as those are the bikes that started selling in large numbers when Buell really took off, and you actually saw quite a few of those around on the road and in Harley-Davidson dealers back in the day, and I had a test ride on the S1 Lightning at the time. So that brings us to the Ulysses, which was Buell's entry into the large capacity adventure bike market. Now the Ulysses, which was designated the XB12X, was introduced in 2006, and it was sold as an adventure sports bike. It had long travel suspension, and it was designed for riding on both paved and unpaved roads. It weighed about 425 pounds, and it was powered by the 103 horsepower 1200cc Thunderstorm engine, which was Buell's development of the Harley-Davidson Sportster engine. They'd taken that Sportster engine and really developed it, squeezed a lot more power out of it, and so it offered what was really impressive performance by the standards of the day. Remember, we're going back 15 years ago now. I rode that bike, and looking back, I wonder if it was just too ahead of its time. Now we have high performance adventure bikes such as the Ducati Multistrada and the KTM 1290, but back then maybe people didn't know what to make of it. You've got to remember that, you know, it was a bit of a strange beast back then. It was a high performance adventure bike in a world where most adventure bikes weren't high performance, but it had a Harley-Davidson engine in it. Oh well, the Buell engine, but you know, many saw it as a Harley-Davidson engine. So I think many punters were just confused about what it was, including myself. I was, and I think that's why I just didn't know what to make of it. I remember reading a review by Motorcycle News in the UK that gave it a very lukewarm reception. And as I say, I rode one myself, and I wasn't impressed because I was riding it as an adventure bike, and I felt it didn't compare well with the BMW GS at the time. But you've got to remember that back then the GS was already very well developed as an adventure bike, you know, by the time we saw the Ulysses launch. But I think Buells have always been bikes that have evoked a mixed reaction. Die-hard Buell fans love them, and as I've already suggested, I think many other riders, and I include myself in this bracket, have just been a little confused as to exactly what they are. But with that comment, I am in no way denigrating the brand. We've got to remember that Buell sold over 130,000 bikes before it was closed down by Harley-Davidson. So you cannot dismiss Buell fans as an eccentric minority. Buell was a serious player, and sales were growing rapidly at the time they were closed down, exponentially. You know, that the company was really taking off. And so I guess that brings us to this point that I raised a moment ago, which was, what if Harley-Davidson had not closed down Buell and they'd continued to back Buell with the development of these new bikes? They would have been one of the earlier entrants into the, you know, large capacity adventure sports bike market, and they, you know, be very well established in that market by now. And also they would have a range of other bikes as well, successful bikes. We've got to remember that at the moment Harley-Davidson are in dire straits financially. We're in an environment where motorcycle sales are booming. Other manufacturers are doing very well. Some of them are growing and expanding rapidly. But Harley-Davidson is really struggling. Yes, it's still got a large share of the market, but what you've got to keep an eye on is what's happening on the stock markets. Harley-Davidson price is low, it's out of favour as an investment, and it's really struggling. And some people are even suggesting that unless Harley-Davidson is able to produce some decent financial results over the next couple of years, it could even end up being delisted from the stock markets and just literally slide off the edge of a table. Let's hope we don't see that. But my point in my previous video was that the Pan America really is a make or break for Harley-Davidson. Unless they can break into this different market, they are really struggling. Just before I stop, another word about Eric Buell. He is very much still on the go, and he's continued with various other ventures since the closure of the Buell Motor Company by Harley-Davidson. And perhaps I'll make another video just focusing on Eric Buell and his work, because he is unquestionably one of the giants of the motorcycle world. So thanks for joining me. I hope you found that interesting. If you have, please consider subscribing for more content like this, and I'll see you on the next ride. Bye.